not really loving your partner the way that you should love them.
A lot of people, they don't actually like the person. That's why I said, like, they love them.
Resenting the person you're with or harboring some sort of ill feelings because of this thing that they do.
Over time, as you keep on building these things up, then you will get bitterness and resentment. And that is the decay that happens in a relationship.
So the topic today is, we're going to have to get more into it because it's a little more complicated than it sounds. But you had the phrase, I don't like you, but I love you, to describe what the topic is. And it's kind of like not really loving your partner the way that you should love them. Or like the way that makes your marriage easier and the connection easier and all of those things.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think I described it well? We talked a little bit about this. Is there anything you would add?
I mean, I would say a lot of people.
Just like the topic.
Yeah, a lot of people, they don't actually like the person. That's why I said, like, they love them.
Right.
They're like, you know, because you hear it all the time. You hear the joke, so I couldn't stand being stuck in a room with my husband for 5 days or whatever, right? So it's like, or
and does that sound like a marriage you want to be in? Like, and
I
that's
love,
normal.
or you might even hear, I love my husband, but I just can't stand to be around him for that long.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about. We're talking about when you think those things, when you say those type of things. Yeah.
Well, it's actually way deeper than that. And that's why we picked this topic today. Well, I picked it and talked to John about it to see what he thought, and he agreed. So I guess I'll kind of go first with one aspect of it that I came to realize. I think, too, that people love their partner. They love their spouse. They love the person they're in a relationship with. But it's not the level of love that marriage should be. And what I mean by that is, like, you love your family. You love your friends. And you get in a relationship and you love that person, but it's kind of on the same level of love, right? Everybody, their family, they love their family. But there are probably a lot of things about each family member that they can't stand or they don't like.
Right.
Same with your friends. You love your friends, but there's probably some like things that they do that you don't really like, that, you know, kind of bother you. Yeah. And then people have that same sort of vibe with the person that they're with. So they're like, oh, well, this is love because this is how I feel with my family. This is how I feel with my friends. And this is how I feel with my partner. So that goes along the same lines. So it's got to be love, right? And and like nobody's perfect, which is true.
Right.
I'm not saying that everybody needs to be perfect.
Sure.
I'm just saying that what I've realized is that is what is causing a lot of the relationships, like you said, where people are like, well, I don't really like my husband, but I love him, of course. Or like, I love him, but don't make me stay in a room with him for a day or, you know, locked up during COVID or anything because I'll lose my mind. That's not how it should be.
Right.
And I didn't realize it myself until I met you, because a lot of the other people I had dated, it was still on that same plane, right? Like there were things that I didn't necessarily like. They weren't like horrible in some of them, but there were things that kind of bothered me, but I loved them, right? Like I did love them. And until you came along, I realized that the type of love you need to have for a marriage, I guess, is what they would call true love, right? Which sounds cliche, don't get me wrong. But again, when I also got with you, I realized a lot of the cliche things are true. So I would call this true love when you like the person you're with. You don't have anything that gives you the ick, as women call it, or like that bother you to a point where you start resenting the person you're with or harboring some sort of ill feelings because of this thing that they do, right? That bothers you. You love them entirely for who they are. And and I think that is like one level up. And I'm not saying you can't have this with your family members or your friends, but I think in a romantic relationship, the person that you're building your life with, then you it has to be that level of love,
Right.
to get married and be happily married for a long time.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question then.
Okay.
Do you think that most people start off that way and then lose it? Or do you think that they never even had it?
I think that the honeymoon phase that people talk about feels that way because you haven't noticed
Right.
anything that's really bothering you yet. It's
Right.
still new. There's still like, this freshness to it. And then people start realizing things that they don't necessarily like. And their love is not deep enough so that it does bother them. And then it grows into this, I love my husband, but I don't really like him. Or like,
Right.
I love my husband, but I could not spend a day locked in a room with him. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
So when you have the true love, though, it is there from the beginning. But it is almost still kind of masked by the honeymoon phase. But you realize when the honeymoon phase doesn't end that you're in that true love, right? Because there's nothing kind of waking you up from that. And even if your partner does something wrong, I'm not saying that they're perfect. I'm not saying that you can't get upset with them. I'm not saying that, they can't make you sad or angry or whatever.
Right.
But you handle it differently when you're in true love when those things happen. You still come from a loving place because you love them entirely. You love them so much.
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt them even if they hurt you. And people don't have that because they don't like the person they're with. And you don't even have to like strongly dislike the person or
Right.
even slightly dislike. But if you don't have that full love for who they truly are in all their imperfections,
Okay.
then that will happen. Like you'll be more likely to lash out towards them. You'll be more likely to say things to hurt them. You'll be more likely to yell at them. You won't view it as, even if you're upset, you don't want to hurt the person you love.
Right. Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. I would posit a slightly different theory.
Okay.
Well, and you've heard me talk about this before, right? So the cavity theory. Right.
Yes.
Right.
The tooth decay.
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of the two things, if I'm being totally honest here. But because I think there is a compatibility, like a match, like a true, like you're saying, the more romantic ideal of it. But then there's also, I think, a practical part of it, which is that if you don't brush your teeth, you're going to get plaque on your teeth. And that plaque builds up over time. And if you don't go to the dentist and they don't scrape the plaque off, it's going to end up becoming a cavity and it's going to decay your tooth. And the same thing in a relationship. If you have fights, you have little arguments, you have little things that don't get resolved, they build up over time. And over time, as you keep on building these things up, then you will get bitterness and resentment. And that is the decay that happens in a relationship, I think, for a lot of people, because they do start off all starry-eyed and in the honeymoon phase. And that's why I think people think there is a honeymoon phase. And what I think is happening most of the time is that, yeah, you could say that there's chemicals in your brain that are wearing off in this natural process. But I think beyond that, what's mostly happening is that, and you see it all the time, right? We've seen it with many people that we've interacted with where they will have a big fight. A couple of days will pass and it'll blow over as if it just disappeared. They haven't really hashed it out. They haven't really come to resolution. Maybe some apologies were said, but they weren't. But they didn't really get to the root of the issue and
Or try to prevent it next.
exactly.
Better than